to the show, everyone. I love the topic that we're going to be talking about right now. My first guest is Susan Pintel. She's the owner of Pintel Family Law. We are live on Facebook, so I do want to say hi to everybody out there. Like us and follow us. We'll share the show later on. We are going to talk about prenuptial agreements. Oh, I love that.
Yes.
And I mean, I want to talk about that big time. But I also want you first to talk a little bit about yourself because, you know, you've been doing what you do for quite some time, and I want them to hear a little bit about you. Go ahead.
Absolutely. So I have been doing family law exclusively in the Phoenix metro area for 18 years, and that basically allows me to handle people that are going through divorce with or without children. I do custody cases, I do third party or grandparents' rights cases. And as mentioned, I also draft prenuptial agreements. So for those of you who are going to get married and want to get out of the community property laws of the state of Arizona, that's a really great way of doing it. I also do enforcement hearings. I do modifications of prior orders. So if you want to modify your parenting time or your child support, that's all matters that I handle, and I've been handling those exclusively for the past 18 years.
Anybody that's knows somebody that's getting married, for a wedding gift, give them a prenup agreement, right?
It sounds funny to say it, but
it's almost true.
It's almost true. I look at a prenuptial as a really smart way of, kind of avoiding the downside of marriage. So what do I mean by that? I handle divorces. I see all the ugly stuff. I see all the stuff that went wrong. And I hear from clients all the time, Susan, I didn't know that that's how it was going to work out. I didn't understand the law. And so, for instance, he was paying the mortgage, I was paying for the vacations, we were splitting the grocery bills, and I say that it doesn't matter. It's all community property, salary during the marriage. And so in your mind, you may have been paying for this, he may have been paying for that. The truth is that the community, right, which is your spouse and yourself, you're paying for that. So if you don't understand that, and you have this dynamic in place where, again, you're somehow like mathematically keeping track, and I often hear this when people are like, well, he didn't pay for the house or she didn't pay for the house. I'm thinking to myself, okay, wait, there's no prenuptial in place, right? Okay, so no, you weren't paying for the house, the community was paying for the house, and that's a real big slap in the face for a lot of people.
I absolutely bet. Now here's the first one you got here,
Yeah.
and I want you to kind of talk a little bit about this right here. It says, what do you suppose the number one regret is for the couples who are divorcing?
Yeah, like I mentioned, it's going into a marriage and having this plan in your head about how you're going to live your life with your spouse. Okay, so I'm a spender, he's a saver, that's great. I'm spending my salary on all of these items. So it's not affecting my spouse, it's not a big deal, or vice versa. And that's not true. And if you don't understand that, when you get to, unfortunately, if you get to that point where you're divorcing, let's just assume for a second that you've had the past 10 years of your life where you think, my salary is mine, it's not ours, okay? And that's what I'm trying to tell people is, if you're married without a prenuptial agreement in the state of Arizona, your salary is a community property asset. So it's not just yours, it belongs to you and your spouse. It belongs to the community. So I have a lot of people who come to me and say, well, Susan, I bought the house, I bought the car, I bought the this, I paid for the vacation. And I have to really sit down and break the news that it just, no, that's not it. You in your mind, you may have thought that, but it's the community paying for that all along. So the other person gets credit for that, right?
It always, what is that? How do they not know? Like, I probably didn't know.
Well, because you think about the fact that if you are getting your paycheck in your name, it doesn't have your spouse's name on it, right? So it's my salary, I'm making it, my employer is giving it to me. And oh, by the way, I'm putting it in my bank account, which just has my name on it. So wouldn't you think, right, and it makes sense if you're not a family law attorney, if you've never been through a divorce, you don't know somebody who's been through this in the state of Arizona, wouldn't you think that, well, it's my name, it's mine, I get paid, I deposit it, it's my account, my spouse doesn't have access to it, why would it be his or hers, right? Well, that's the number one problem. So that's where people come to me and say, well, if only I had known that, Well, the prenup helps you,
See, that this is
Yeah.
what this show's about, because when you put these little things in people's minds, they're like, oh, that's a good idea. That's right. Now, let me give out some information. First of all, her website is pintellaw.com, so it's Pintel law.com. She has a couple of different phone numbers. One is 480-397-2261, or for texting, you can do 520-355-4483. Now, you also do a free it's a half an hour, like a consultation that you do. You gotta find out what's going on with everybody and see if you guys are a good fit. I'm telling you now, when you're working with somebody who's been doing family law, one thing, for 18 years, congratulations on that
Thank you.
as well, as you want somebody who is like her, because you know what? And also, please, anybody that has been told, don't worry, you don't need an attorney, get yourself one.
I'm gonna tell you, people that call me during the consultation, that's one of the questions that they'll ask, like, do I really need an attorney? Because, hey, I can go get like a prenup form and download it. And I say to them, great, and do you actually know what that means? And there's like a pause, and you hear silence, and they're like, well, and I'm like, okay, so let me just run a scenario past you. So, you have an inheritance, and the form tells you, yeah, that's your separate property. That's great. What you do with the money after you get married, that's what's really gonna control things. And so the number one mistake, again, is, well, that's my inheritance, so I used money from my inheritance to buy a house during the marriage, and I read somewhere online that any money that was derived from an inheritance stays separate property. Right, but there are specific rules about purchasing real property, real estate in the state of Arizona. So that's where I tell people, I'm not here to twist your arm. I'm not here to tell you you need an attorney, but it is absolutely advisable to at least get the facts straight, get the law straight, do a consultation. I do offer a half hour free of charge, but if people want to come to me with documents or for more in-depth, I'll do 1 hour, I'll do it virtual or in person. I will charge you for it, but I think it saves you down the road, because again, a lot of the people that come to me and say, well, I just assumed that because I was using my inheritance money to buy the house, it was mine. That's not the way it works, and now you're dividing what is probably your number one asset.
Yeah, but how do you not know whose name is not on the house, on the deed,
Right,
on the loan?
but Carol, that's what I'm saying, that even if it's just your name on the deed, you still are going to trace back and see who contributed money to that. And so if you say, hey, that was my sole and separate property inheritance, and I didn't get my, and sometimes what happens, this is the disconnect, right? So your spouse will say, okay, great, and nobody signs a disclaimer deed, and now you both end up on the house. But again, it's your idea that, oh, because it's my inheritance money, right? So you fill in the dots, because there are all these scenarios that play out, and I don't want to confuse right now the audience in terms of like different scenarios without like getting into the facts, but that's why I'm saying that this form that you're filling out, you're not really sure that you're connecting the dots properly.
Attorney.
Yeah, you do need an attorney.
You really do. And I think that's a great idea, because number one, you're gonna find out exactly, and when, God forbid, we don't want anything to happen for anybody,
Yeah.
but it does, and you have to be protected, and that's what it's all about, really, more than anything. Not only being protected, but understanding.
Yeah, a lot of people say, oh, if I get a prenuptial, that signals to the person that I'm marrying that I don't love them. And it depends how you present it, because you can tell people, look, I don't want there to be misunderstandings down the road.
I don't either. Her phone number is 480-397-2261. It's Pintel, Pintel law.com. Hang tight, we'll be back in just a minute.
Yeah, so talking about the house thing, right? So that's why, unless I have like a scenario that I'm gonna follow through on, some people do disclaimer deeds, right? But then they say, you see, it's my house, and his name is not on there, or her name is not on there. And I say, right, but who's been paying the mortgage? Well, I have, right, but you don't have that in the prenuptial, that your salary is separate property, right? So your salary is a community property asset. Your community property is paying for a separate property asset. The fact is, the community is entitled to a lien, right? So people don't understand that part of it, and they think, well, wait a minute, but you told me it was separate property, why am I still paying them like a certain amount, right?
Mhm.
Well, because that's a community lien.
Oh,
So the prenuptial really has to address, if you really want that to continue to be sole and separate, then you have to talk about, where's the money to pay the mortgage coming from? Are you now pointing out that salary that is used to pay the mortgage is going to be agreed to by both spouses to be that person's sole and separate property? Are you doing away with a community lien? What happens if you take out a HELOC? Because that's not a mortgage. Are we gonna treat the HELOC the same way that we would treat the mortgage? I mean, there are all these really intricate steps.
So do you honestly agree that really everybody should have a prenup?
I think absolutely. I've talked to people in all age ranges. I have a really nice woman right now who's in her mid-20s. She's been very successful. She has 2 of her own businesses. She's already bought her own residence and paid it off. I think it would absolutely be to her benefit and more, and it is because that's why she's hired me.
Especially like that.
But more people in that situation, because what happens when your spouse moves into your house and it's great for the first 2 years, and then your spouse starts to say, well, I never really felt that this was our house. This was always your house. So honey, why don't we take the money that you get from the proceeds of the sale of your house and we buy a house together? Okay, that's great, but that's where you say, wait, what does this really mean, right? Because it's your sole and separate property proceeds from your sole and separate property asset. But the moment that you buy a house during marriage, that's presumed to be a community property asset, right? So now not only do you have to say to the person, okay, any sole and separate property money that I'm putting as a down payment, we're gonna have to sign off and acknowledge that that's my separate property. That's not a gift to the community, number one. Number two, okay, so now you're gonna find a disclaimer deed, okay, and then what do we do about where's the money coming from for the mortgage, for the real property taxes, for the insurance? Where's that coming from? Because if that's still deemed a community property asset, now you're creating a community lien.
Hmm.
So the judge can't take away your house, it's your sole and separate property, but you're gonna have to pay a certain amount of money. That's what people don't understand.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
My goodness,
No.
I don't even wanna say what I was gonna say.
And the form doesn't tell you that.
Of course,
Yeah.
of course not.
Yeah.
Welcome back, everyone. I love the breaks because we talk a little bit more here to Facebook land, and you said a mouthful,
Yeah.
really, really. But one of the things that you said that just really, kind of stood out in my mind was how there are many successful people out there now that are older, that haven't gotten married yet,
Yes.
and now they want to get married.
Yeah. Listen, I'm gonna tell you, like I said before, a prenuptial does not signal to the other person, I don't love you, I don't trust you. I think a prenuptial signals to the other person, I really wanna be very reasonable, I really wanna be very informed, and I want you to be reasonable and informed, right? Because the prenuptial agreement to withstand judicial scrutiny, it has to be fair to both parties, right? So you're not trying to take the other party's, legal rights away, that's not gonna withhold scrutiny. It has to be favorable to both. So what do I mean by that, right? So we talked about the house a moment ago, and let's assume that, somebody has a house that they had before marriage, and now they're gonna take those sale proceeds, they're gonna buy a house with somebody else. Again, you have to understand that you're gifting that money to the community absent some written understanding, okay? You have to have a disclaimer deed that's signed, you have to figure out where the money to pay the mortgage, and the upkeep and the maintenance, and the real estate taxes and the insurance, and what happens if you do a remodel? Where is all that money coming from, right? Because what I hear a lot is, that was always your house, I never really felt comfortable, I wanna make it our house.
Hmm.
Okay, so now where's all that money coming from? If you don't have a prenuptial, that's community property funds, and now the judge isn't gonna take the house away from you because it's a separate property asset if you have the other spouse sign a disclaimer deed, but there's a community lien, and so there's a certain amount of money, and I can't tell you what that is because it's, case specific, that you're gonna have to pay the other spouse. That's what people really, really miss. And to your point, so let's assume you wanna keep, that house, if I sell it, right, we're gonna draft it in such a way that the next house that we buy, it's gonna still continue to be mine, and that can be balanced out by the next topic, which is a business. Let's say that you're marrying a spouse who has their own business, and especially for people who are like in their 30s or 40s, they've built up that business, it's very successful. They want to keep all of that to themselves. Like, you're gonna keep your house. If you buy a house during marriage, we're gonna make sure that it's understood that that house, you know, continues to be yours. I wanna keep my business separate, and I wanna, again, make sure that the audience understands, if you have an asset before marriage, that's your sole and separate property asset. I'm not disputing that. A lot of people get confused. What happens, again, where's the source of the money coming from to pay for that asset? Okay, if it's a community property asset, you've now built a community lien that you're gonna have to pay off at some point in the future. Amount, fill in the blank, we don't know until we get to that point. Likewise with a business, it's your sole and separate property, but the salary that you're deriving, unless you have a prenuptial that addresses how you want that salary to be handled, that salary is now community property. And you know, ugly divorces centering on a business, it's because, was that spouse, you know, paying themselves market value salary? Were they underpaying themselves? Were they paying personal, you know, debt through the business? It gets really complicated. So a prenuptial is, I think, the best way to handle it, because, and I don't mean to be glib about this, but you're both in that stage in your relationship where you're happy and you want to talk to each other and you want to hammer out a deal that is going to be really beneficial to both of you. If you don't have a prenuptial, you leave this up in the air, you get to the divorce, you're going at it like cats and dogs. Somebody's going to say day, the other person's going to say night. You're not going to see eye to eye, and that's where you're going to really spend most of your time on that battlefield over, was the salary fair, was it not? I mean, did you gift that money to the community? That's not what I meant. Well, do you have a written document that proves otherwise? It gets really complicated and timely, and it's just very expensive, and it's emotionally draining.
I think that people think when you talk about a prenup, that it's all about money. And it's really not. It sounds like so much more.
It is. It's about knowing how you're going to set up your marriage. It's knowing about, this is how we're going to live our life, right? So if you don't understand how the law works, and you are just like, again, putting money in a bank account with your name alone, and you're thinking at the end of the marriage, because, you know, your spouse did the same thing, but you were the saver, he was the spender, or vice versa, right? Because I don't want to gender stereotype. You know, you're gonna split whatever is in those bank accounts at the end of the day. And if you say, well, wait a minute, you know, in my savings, in my investment, in my retirement account, I was very, very adult about it, and I saved, and I have 200, let's say just random number today, 250,000, and your spouse was like saving, you know, some money, but spending on these lavish vacations, and hey, I wanted that really great, you know, electronic, and why don't we get the latest and greatest? And at the end, you know, you have maybe just 50,000. You're not keeping your 250, and he or she's not keeping that 50. You're dividing $300,000. So either somebody just, you know, hit the jackpot by a lot, or somebody just lost by a lot. That's what people do not
really
understand.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, gosh, that's why you need an attorney. And what I also love about you too is that you're really all about education.
Absolutely.
You know?
Absolutely. I turn people away when I feel like there's no case here, or you don't need my services, or this is what the court system can provide. I'm a really firm believer, and it sounds corny, but I treat people the way I want to be treated. I get a lot of referrals, you know, to this day. A lot of my businesses, you know, you helped my cousin 5 years ago, and I remember he was like really devastated with the divorce, but he said, you know, my attorney was like a really very decent person, and, you know, she promised that she was going to be able to do X, Y, and Z, because that's what the judge was likely to do. And so, you know, I really build my business on that, because I think, for what it's worth, if I do the right thing, obviously that's what this should be about.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it really should be from the get-go. And that's why a prenup is always really nice. And so let me give out her phone number. It's 480-397-2261, or you can also text her at 520-355-4483. She's been doing this for 18 years, and her website is Pintel, Pintel law.com. I want to go to child support, but I also want to go here because I did this, sort of. So I'm going to go here.
Yeah.
So I'm not married, but I have a child with someone, and we've had a verbal agreement with the other parent about parenting time. That's big, parenting time.
Yeah, so, you know, the prenuptial agreement is not about parenting time. Let me just make that clear. So a prenuptial agreement is about finances. But as long as we're talking about kids, one of the things that I normally see, again, depending on, you know, how old you are when you get married, or how old you are when you have kids, and now you're going into your second relationship or your third relationship, but it's your first marriage, right? So you have children from other relationships, and you've been paying child support, and this is a big factor for some people out there, because I just had a really nice gentleman who said, look, I'm crazy about this woman, I'm marrying her because of that, but Susan, she has 4 other children, and she's still paying child support, and it's a hefty amount. And so what can we do about that in the prenuptial? And I told her, I love your kids like they're mine, but I don't like the thought of me having her salary go towards this, right? So I told him, I said, well, you can put that the amount of salary that she has to pay towards the child support, is her sole and separate property, or you can make it so that if that's not something that you want to do and it's community property, you can tell her that you're going to get a reimbursement for half, and treat it like any other debt, right? It's a debt that you have to pay. So what do? Arizona community property law says any debt that is incurred during the marriage, right, is a community property asset. You're each 50% liable for it. Well, you are making those child support payments during the marriage, so it is a community property debt, okay, so you're on the hook for half. So just tell her, look, if we ever get a divorce and you ended up during the course of the marriage paying $10,000, I'd like reimbursement for $5,000. And it sounds crazy, right? If you've not been in that situation, oh my God, that's so crass. It's like, why would you do that? Believe me, if you are getting divorced and you've been paying for that child support, you're going to want to get some, of that money back.
Keep good records.
Yeah, absolutely. And,
I'm laughing.
And that's why I'm saying, no, people, they look at me and they're offended that I'm even raising this. It's like, oh my God, it's a child. I understand that, but if you are married to a person long enough and you're talking about tens of thousands of dollars, it becomes, again, I'm not equating a child to a dollar amount, but it becomes any other debt that you would otherwise be, able to negotiate, how are we going to get reimbursement, how are we going to treat this? So I see that.
I will say this, and I wish we had so much more time, but a marriage is a business.
It is.
It really, really is, and we don't really think about that. And I don't care how many times you get married, really we don't. But I think the idea of having, as much as you don't want to do this, a prenup is really, really a great way to make sure that, God forbid anything happens. It just puts everything.
And again, let me say, it's not one-sided. For this to work, both people come to the table with issues that they want addressed, and you have that transparent conversation, and you reach agreements. That's the beauty of it.
I love it. Now, again, I could talk forever, and I love what we're talking about because it's so important, and maybe it will keep you together even longer. Her number is 480-397-2261, or text her at 520-355-4483. It's PintelLaw.com.